So now we all have to pretend how shocked and appalled we are. The impeachment didn't go according to plan. The requisite number of Republican senators have not hopped on board with the effort to bring forth witnesses to the trial. And this means that democracy is over, the Constitution has been abolished, and the Republic, as we know it, has crumbled into 1,000 pieces and will never recover. The United States is done because Lamar Alexander, the Republican senator from Tennessee, chose not to support the Democratic motion to bring John Bolton and potentially others into the Senate trial as witnesses. So when you put it that way, hopefully that gives you a little bit more perspective on why it's so inane when you see all these people shrieking with the most apocalyptic hyperbole about what this failure in terms of what's essentially procedural minutia portends for the future of the country. They want us to believe that because a motion to bring witnesses did not succeed, we're done for. Well, I could have told you that this was going to be the outcome when the articles of impeachment were passed, when the impeachment inquiry was launched, when impeachment was first entertained as a plausible idea last spring, and even before Trump took office. Now, the impeachment trial is not over yet, and there was never any chance, really, at all, that Trump was ever going to be convicted. But they were hoping, I guess, to stretch this out for another week or two by passing a motion to bring witnesses into the trial, and they needed to get 3 to 4 Republican senators to support that. And it's so tedious because you knew all along which 4 senators on the Republican side were going to be the ones that we all had to eagerly anticipate their next move and read tea leaves to determine what they were thinking. So at least as of now, Susan Collins and Mitt Romney will support the Democratic motion to bring witnesses. Lamar Alexander will oppose it. And Lisa Murkowski has not announced her intention yet, and may vote no. But even if she votes yes, that brings it to a 50-50 tie. And presumably that then means that the motion fails because John Roberts almost certainly is not going to cast a deciding vote, and it's not even clear what his precise constitutional role is there. Now, I do have to say that I don't even buy that there are sound reasons to reject all witnesses. And that's coming from somebody, me, who has expressed pretty strident contempt for this impeachment process in numerous respects. But I don't think that then means that that witnesses should be precluded from giving testimony, or documents should be precluded from being subpoenaed. I don't buy the logic there. And so again, I can hold competing thoughts in my head simultaneously. The first thought being, I steadfastly object to this impeachment on probably a dozen different grounds, if not more. And yet, I don't accept the Republican argument that allowing for witnesses to testify or allowing for documents to be presented is out of bounds. But and if anything, even if your goal is simply to exonerate Trump, what's the harm in just letting it go on another week or two? If anything, it will make the vindication more triumphant because there'll be more quote unquote suspense. And Trump's approval rating has gone up since this impeachment started. And Democrats have made themselves look foolish. So even if you're operating from a purely political standpoint and you just want to do whatever is strategically most advantageous for Trump, then I still don't get why you'd want to rush this to a close right away. It's almost a political gift because it highlights the warped thinking and warped priorities of the Democrats in particular. And would you want that on full display? Would you want that to keep going and dragging on? Because it actually seemingly emboldens the Trump support base and makes them resentful of Democrats for appearing, at least, to be attempting to overturn the previous election, even though obviously impeachment and conviction would not literally overturn the previous election, but it gives that impression. And so if that's a self-destructive course of action politically for the Democrats, if you're Republicans, why wouldn't you want it to go on longer? I don't really get that. And so I don't get it on a political level, and I also don't buy it on a substantive level. I think there's every reason for Bolton to testify. Not because I think he's going to provide any bombshell information, but because he's pretty clearly a fact witness to the misdeeds that are alleged to have been committed. And I don't even agree with the characterizations of those actions, but I still can agree that Bolton is a material witness. So, as usual, it's clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. I'm not willing to parrot every partisan Republican talking point just because I don't agree with the Democrats' impeachment case or their rationale or their manner in which they've presented and argued it. See, if you at least strive to be a little bit independent in your thinking, you're able to do that. So I can still agree that it's rather pathetic for every Democratic pundit and journalist to be desperately begging for Mitt Romney and Lamar Alexander and Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski to please, 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 pretty please, get on board with their ultimately meaningless procedural motions that no one is going to remember in a month. So that just highlights the fundamental absurdity of the process, including the fact that we have to now pine for John Bolton to give a divine intervention. So I agree with the stupidity of that state of affairs, but I don't agree that it's inherently stupid or unwarranted for witnesses to be called. It seems like, given that we're in the midst of this trial anyway, why not see it out to its full fruition? And Bolton testifying is not going to make Democrats look any better. It might even end up making them look worse. Having him there as their star witness just underscores how nonsensical the impeachment case is and how it's predicated on elevating these unreconstructed Russia hawks like Bolton to make their case for them. So I'm not even saying that I would advocate this because it helps Democrats. I'm saying because you would want a full record established, or the fullest possible record established, that's within the purview of the Senate to accumulate, just so the matter is put to rest. Otherwise, when Bolton's book comes out in March or whatever, we're going to have to go through another round of insanity when it all could have just been over and done with if they just allowed for an ample record to be compiled. And so, and if you're Republicans and you want to just maximize the craziness, why not allow this trial to go on until at least next week when you have the Iowa caucus on Monday? So if you just want to troll the Democrats, you could keep it going till Monday, and you'll have Bernie and Warren and Klobuchar and Bennett not even being able to go to Iowa on the day of the caucus. I mean, that would be an epic troll move. So why the rush to wrap this up and have Trump potentially acquitted in the middle of the night tomorrow? I'm not sure I get that. So I guess the final vote to convict or acquit is probably going to be late in the night tomorrow or maybe Saturday. Assuming that nothing unexpected happens with this motion to compel witnesses. And, maybe John Roberts does decide to exert some prerogative. I think it's probably unlikely. But in the event of a 50-50 split, it's not as if that there's a clearly defined, constitutionally prescribed action that Roberts is obliged to take at that point. It's sort of within his own discretion. And people on CNN, which I'm half watching, and elsewhere keep pointing to a precedent where Chief Justice Samuel Chase in the Andrew Johnson impeachment trial did break ties in the Senate. And was criticized for it, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it has happened. Now, Samuel Chase was planning on running for president later, so he had a different set of considerations, whereas I don't think that's what John Roberts is intending on doing. So he's probably going to want to take as little of an assertive role as possible. Speaking of John Roberts, you might have seen the incident earlier today where he refused to read a question submitted by Rand Paul. And this was odd because John Roberts cited no rationale for why he refused to read the question. He just said that in the judgment of the presiding officer, he would not read it. And then Rand Paul put out the statement, put out the question that he had intended to ask over Twitter shortly thereafter. And people were saying, oh, we have to arrest Rand Paul because he outed the whistleblower. Whistleblower in scare quotes. First of all, how would John Roberts know for sure if the individual named in the Rand Paul question was in fact the whistleblower? In the question, Rand Paul didn't say this person was the whistleblower. He just stated the name of the person. So did John Roberts do independent research and figure out that this individual was alleged to be the whistleblower? That was a little odd. And it was doubly odd because my understanding is that the Senate could have voted to override John Roberts there and compel him to read the question. It's ultimately the Senate who wields the authority in the context of an impeachment trial. And they're not strictly jurors. They act in sort of a dual judge/jury capacity because in a normal criminal trial or a civil trial, the jurors don't get to set the rules, whereas the senators set their own rules here. So I think they could have forced, if they wanted to, John Roberts to read that question, but they chose not to go down that road because, I guess Rand Paul said I could just go tweet it out right away, regardless. But Roberts refusing to read that question, I don't know, might be a slight harbinger of what's to come in the event of a 50-50 tie, because it shows that he's willing to exert some independent oversight or use his independent judgment to make determinations about the propriety of various events. And so maybe he then does say it's within his capacities to compel witnesses in the event of a tie. But then again, the Senate could conceivably then just vote to override it, in which case I think that the 2 or 3 Republican senators who do vote with the Democrats to compel witnesses would probably revert back to partisan form and say that, no, we want witnesses, but now that witnesses have not been approved because no majority was obtained, we still want to assert the primacy of the Senate's authority to determine how the trial unfolds. And so they could vote to override Roberts. I mean, now we're sort of speculating because there's a whole variety of potential scenarios here. And if you're sort of just into the minutia of American constitutional law, it is pretty interesting because this is only the 3rd impeachment trial ever. And there is some pretty far out scenarios that could happen here. But ultimately, it's not going to be that material because Trump's going to be acquitted. There's no way they're ever getting 67 votes. And they were never going to. But you'll have people complain that, oh my God, our country is doomed. Okay, maybe the country's doomed in various respects, but they're not doomed because your little military aid to Ukraine impeachment crusade didn't work. The country's not doomed because the CIA whistleblower that you cultivated didn't successfully launch a process that resulted in the removal of the president. The country may be doomed for a variety of other socio-political reasons, but not for this one that's dominating cable news and the Twitter feeds of pundits. That's not what's going to doom the country. And I will never accept that Trump or any other president could be said, let me rephrase. I will never accept that temporarily withholding future dispersals of military aid, but not actually withholding that aid, and then mentioning Joe Biden on a phone call constituted the most egregious acts of presidential wrongdoing that Trump or any other president has committed. That's sort of what you're conveying with this impeachment. If you're saying that we're going to take this most of dramatic steps and impeach Trump on the grounds of temporarily withholding future military aid and mentioning Joe Biden on a phone call, what you're conveying in that action is that the Congress, or at least the House of Representatives, regards it as an unprecedentedly egregious action. And when I look out on the full range of presidential action with regard to Trump or anybody else, any other president, I just cannot accede to the idea that this rises anywhere even close to the top of the heap in terms of the wrongfulness of presidential action. And to suggest otherwise is sort of an insult. What this really communicates is more about the warped priorities of American political and media elites than about any genuine desire to impose accountability for wrongdoing, because people get away with wrongdoing all the time. And impeachment is never even entertained as a plausible remedial recourse. But they decided to get on board with this. And why they do it? Because they had the foundation already set by Russiagate. They had the thematic foundation already put into place by Russiagate. That's why they invoke Mueller and Russiagate and Russia and Putin constantly over the course of this trial. and say, oh, Trump invited or welcomed foreign interference in 2016, and now because Mueller told us this, and now he might do it again in 2020, or he tried to do it again. So they kind of package it all together into the same narrative continuum. So I don't accept the validity of that, and I don't accept that there's this grand moral requirement that everybody fall into line behind the validity of this. I mean, it's so insufferable to listen to some of the questions that are asked and the rhetoric invoked, mostly on the Democratic side, but also to a significant degree on the Republican side. Like, there was a question that was put today to John Roberts during the question and answer session. It was a joint question. Sherrod Brown submitted it on behalf of himself, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar, and I think one or two others. And it was essentially, well, let me read to you a snippet of it because, of course, I was listening on my C-SPAN iPhone app at the time and heard it and had to pause and mark it down because I was so annoyed. Here's the question that Warren and Klobuchar jointly submitted along with Sherrod Brown. But Warren and Klobuchar are the most relevant here because they're running for president, right? This isn't the full question, but this is the most just mind-boggling part of it. If acquitted in the Senate, they ask, what would stop the president from continuing to side with Putin? I mean, what is there to say about that at this point? Like, I feel like I can only rebut that logic so many times. And nobody listens, obviously. So, like, what more is there to say? It's just, I mean, that's why I always maintained that this was never, ever, ever going to be separable from Russiagate. That it was actually a further extension of Russiagate, but just taking on a different phase. And that question, along with a variety of other questions and invocations of rhetoric, prove it. Now, sometimes people ask me, why do I focus on Tulsi so much? Sometimes they even express annoyance that I focus on Tulsi so much. They say, oh, she's a minor candidate. She's not going to win. She's not going to be the nominee. Why do you even bother? Well, maybe she will overperform in New Hampshire for one thing. But even beyond that, if you followed me for any number for any amount of time, you'll know that since the Russiagate narrative first originated, we're now approaching the 4-year mark of that. So that would have been some 2016 when it really launched into full force. Since the very day that I saw that narrative congeal, I was opposed to it on ethical, on evidentiary, and on strategic, practical grounds. So on many different grounds, I was opposed to it, and I wanted to apply my journalistic and analytical resources to explaining and to reporting why this was a very bad thing. And now Tulsi is really the only national political figure, Republican or Democrat, but especially among the Democrats, who poses a challenge to this new Cold War mania, which always is infusing American politics in one way or another. It takes on different permutations. Like this Ukraine impeachment thing is a different permutation, even if it's part of the same sort of narrative continuum. But it's all fundamentally part of the same storyline. And she's the only one who poses a challenge to it. She's the only one who rejects it. So that is the main reason why I have decided to apply the attention to her that I have. That's why I've been to every single one of her events in New Hampshire since December 29th. It's why even before she started writing, I've been covering her, writing about her, speaking about her, tweeting about her, etc. I just feel it's important, and that's my honest belief. So if you're annoyed by it, sorry, go follow someone else. This is one of the signature political issues, if not the signature political issue of our era. And if, in my judgment, there is only one figure who has a rational approach to it and can push back against some of these just totally inane excesses that have overtaken our system, then that's what I'm going to choose to do. And, and for the record, she agrees with me on the witness thing, even though she's against the impeachment thing, as evidenced by one of the responses to the questions that she gave at her little post event press gaggle today. By the way, she got up at like 4 a.m. today, went to D.C., did a vote on restricting Trump's war-making powers with regard to Iran with voting for an amendment that would repeal the 2002 authorization for use of military force in Iraq. Then she flew back to New Hampshire this afternoon, did an event at 6:30 tonight in Portsmouth. That's 2.5 hours when all is said and done. Then had to go do something else, and so she was probably up for like almost 20, like 20 hours straight today, and she seemed oddly unusually energetic tonight. So I don't know what that's about. It was kind of about, I think it was the energy in the room. People were sort of shouting things out and engaging with her a little more assertively tonight. There was one point where a guy wearing a Trump hat, it wasn't even like a MAGA hat, it was a hat that literally said Donald Trump on the back. He was there near the front of her event, and he shouts out and disagrees with her when she's talking about the wrongheadedness of the Soleimani assassination. And they get into like a little bit of a testy exchange. Yeah, testy is not the right word, but they go back and forth about the propriety of the assassination. It's odd because there's always a subset of Trump supporters and Republicans at her events. Not a majority, but a noticeable minority. And they tend to like her for like temperamental reasons. They like her military background. They like sort of just her fundamental, what they think to be sensibility and rationality on various subjects. But most of what she talks about in terms of substantive policy proposals, they end up not liking. But they almost don't care because they sort of like her character, which is interesting. Like, of course, that Trump guy, I'm sure, will claim that he's against the endless wars or something, but he loves the assassination of Soleimani, which created a state of war between the U.S. and Iran for the first time since 1979, because we're now engaged in direct state-to-state warfare. I know people don't believe that, and they think that just because things de-escalated back to a place where World War III is not imminent, even though I never said that World War III was imminent, but I think that we're not in a state of war. It's all fine, even though we have occasional rocket attacks in the embassy, and Mike Pompeo blames Iranian-backed forces for launching those attacks at the embassy a couple days ago. They think we're all clear, and everybody was wrong when they said that we were in a state of war. No. As Tulsi said, and I agree, we are still in a state of war with Iran. It's just some states of war ebb and flow, but there's every possibility that could flare up again at any time, because Trump entered a new phase of warfare with that assassination. Anyway, you know my thoughts on that. What else? Oh, sorry for yawning into the microphone. All right, I guess I'll leave it there. Reminder, if you're able, I highly recommend coming to Concord, New Hampshire on Saturday at 4 p.m. at NHT I, which is Concord's Community College. The address is for an event with Tulsi and Jimmy Dore. I will be there. Other special guests will be there. I'm not going to reveal them, but you will probably know them. It's NHTI, Concord Community College, Sweeney Hall, 31 College Drive, Concord, New Hampshire, on this Saturday, February 1st at 4 p.m. All right, people. Thank you. Let me just scroll through the super chats to make sure I didn't miss anything. Bernard says, via super chat, the Clinton impeachment started this. Trump impeachment is escalating it. Neither was nor will be removed, but woe to the next party that wins the White House but loses the majority in both houses. That president will be removed. You're probably right. You are probably correct. The Republicans are going to be frothing at the mouth to impeach the next Democratic president, just as the Democrats were frothing at the mouth to impeach Trump before he was elected. And given some of the logic that was now entrenched by the impeachment articles, even though they're not going to result in a conviction, the impeachment articles unto themselves create a precedent because they were passed by the House. The allegations are so vague around abuse of power and, insinuating bribery and treason and extortion and all this stuff. It's not going to be that hard to graft that onto the next Democratic president and say, oh, now we're impeaching you, not neither. You did it first. It's like a schoolyard playground thing. But of course, the Republicans won't impeach, most likely, the Democratic president on anything that's substantive or rational. It's going to be a similar, just means like an inverted set of trivialities as this one, with a different partisan inflection. But yeah, you're right that now impeachment is obviously escalating into something that's going to become more and more routine. And you might even argue that it's a good thing, but the problem is they never hone their impeachment on something that actually matters. I would not have supported the Clinton impeachment, even though Clinton obviously committed some wrongdoing there. Because I don't think that rises to the level of a high crime or misdemeanor. I agree with Dershowitz on the Clinton impeachment. That's all I see. Thank you, dear people. And let me know if you come to Concord on Saturday. I will make sure that you find the special guests, and I will talk to you later.